You're watching Local Access, Channel 29, exclusive programming for Comcast subscribers.
Hello and welcome to Civil Discourse. My name is Ken Hurley and you're watching a program sponsored by the American Civil Liberties Union of Greater Jacksonville, Florida. Take a look at this. This is a photograph of a man who we know as Nathan Bedford Forrest. Nathan Bedford Forrest, for those who may not know, is the man who Forrest High School in Jacksonville is named after. Now, who was Nathan Bedford Forrest? He was born in 1821. And he was a big-time slave trader. He made $1 million or more in the slave trade. And who else was Nathan Bedford Forrest? Here's a statue in his honor, a tribute to him. This statue is in Tennessee. He was a slave trader and an imperial wizard of the Ku Klux Klan. Yet we honor this man with a high school named after him in Jacksonville. Now, to discuss this and what we're trying to do and how in the world are we going to bring Jacksonville into the 21st century when we are honoring such a person with a name on a public high school, here to discuss this is Professor Stephen Lance Stoll. Stephen, thank you for being here. I appreciate you being my guest. You're taking the lead on this right now. Others have tried and not been successful at changing the name of Forrest High School. Why should we change it?
Well, I think you stated very well why we should change it. We have a community that has great racial strife, and we have a high school that was named in 1959. It's important, I think, to make that point because Forrest, what you talked about were Forrest's less than admirable characteristics. He was a great general. There are techniques of cavalry warfare that they teach at West Point, I guess, from him. And but he was not honored in 1959 for his Civil War prowess. In my opinion, he was named by the school board in Duval County at a time that we were ignoring Brown versus the Board of Education, and a year before Axe Handle Saturday. So it was clearly both an insult to the Supreme Court and an insult to the African-American community, clearly.
Well, back in the 50s, Jacksonville was a very clearly segregated city.
Very much so.
And the people, the leaders of the city rallied against the idea of segregation all the way through the 90s. There were pending lawsuits even through the 90s and even into the 21st century regarding the failure of Jacksonville to successfully segregate the public high school system. Desegregate the public high school system. Right?
Well, I mean, the Jacksonville, the Duval County School Board ignored Brown versus the Board of Education until 1967. The first integration in schools took place 13 years after the Supreme Court said it was to be done. And then we all know that when Jacksonville's boundaries was expanded to the county consolidation, I'm sure there are plenty of reasons given for it, but clearly the black population at the time in Jacksonville was 46%. So as soon as they diluted the black community by consolidating, they took away any black power that they might have had politically in this community. So we have a long history of this kind of behavior, and again, most people or many people don't know who Forrest was, and they look at it on the school and don't think anything of it. But you know, once you know something, you can't ignore it any longer, and that's what happened with me personally. And I think once people know who this man was and why the school board chose him to honor, they should change it. This is the 21st century. Jacksonville is attempting to be a world city. We had the Super Bowl and all this stuff. So.
Well, a lot of people that don't remember that prior to the Civil Rights Act of 1964, somebody who was African American would not be treated in a hospital. There was only one hospital who would treat a black individual, and that was Brewster Hospital.
Right.
They would not even treat them in the hospitals in Jacksonville.
Right, and in fact, I went back, the Eartha White collection at UNF is really a phenomenal collection of African American history in this community. And I read a document produced by the federal government in 1946 about the differences between the black and the white community in Jacksonville. And one of the things that they brought up was the high infant mortality rate and early death rate in the black community because of the lack of medical care. But I'll tell you, there were segments of that document that if you took out and read today, you'd think they were talking about today. They talk about the lack of trust of African American people towards the police and the fact that there's good reason for that lack of trust. In 1946, and we're 50 years later, the exact same things exist.
Right. We have a lot of people out of the black community who are dealing with the police. Isaiah Rumlin from the NAAC, Pastor Gundy, and many other leaders of the black community are having difficulties with all of the police shootings that we've had. Now there's investigations into some of them. Some of them may have been justified, some of them may not. But nevertheless, that's what's happening, and it's almost like reading the papers from all those decades ago.
Absolutely. It's frighteningly so. Yeah.
How is it that you came upon the name Forrest and decided this was something you were going to champion?
I'm not exactly sure how it came to my attention, but over the summer it came to my attention, and I thought, come on, you can't be serious. So I went online, and you start with Wikipedia, and I went through about 500 sources on the internet, and every one of them confirms who this guy is.
It's always good to confirm what Wiki says.
Right, that's why I did it. Yeah, and in fact, later on, I got so much headache from people who deny what happened that I actually got a book recommended by the Southern Poverty Law Center called The River Run Red, which is the story of Nathan Bedford Forrest and his massacre. And so I verified that I was accurate, and once I found out, I thought, oh my God, I can't believe that we have a school named for that. Children are going to school in a building that honors this kind of a person. And again, my joke to my class was, would we have an Adolf Hitler high school? Of course not. And yet, and Adolf Hitler's well known, so would we have a Goebbels high school? Probably
Joseph
not.
Goebbels,
Right.
So. But you mentioned a massacre. Now, I didn't mention that at the top of the show. I did say he was a slave trader. That wasn't particularly unusual in the day that he lived. He lived from 1821 to 1877. He died when he was 56 years old, made $1 million or more, was very, very wealthy as a result of trading slaves. It's an indisputable fact that he was an imperial wizard of the Ku Klux Klan.
The first.
The first. No, that's not disputed by anybody, apologists included.
Right.
That's
well,
a
the
fact.
apologists say that he left the Klan when it got violent.
Well,
but the reality
but the fact is he was the first.
Right, and he left the Klan when he no longer needed to be in charge of it.
And he liked puppies. Okay, right. All right. Right. Okay, so we get that. He had some soft side, but the fact is he was the first imperial wizard of the Ku Klux Klan.
Correct.
That's indisputable. Right. Now, you brought up the massacre. Talk a little bit about what happened at Fort Pillow, which is always a strange name to me for a fort.
Well, it was actually, I think it was a Union fort, and then it got captured by the Confederates, and then it got captured again by the Union forces. It's around Memphis somewhere. And anyways, Nathan Forrest took the fort back. And during the siege, the people inside the fort surrendered. Okay? There were 236 African-American soldiers, the quote, Buffalo soldiers. In fact, I was watching last night on TV, Glory was on. And Glory is about the Buffalo soldiers. Anyways, 200 of them were brutally murdered. some of them buried alive. And in fact, this quote, "river runs red," comes from Nathan Bedford Forrest himself, who said he killed so many of these people that the Mississippi River ran red.
Well, they talk about, you said brutally murdered, but this is a war, a battle. What happened, why you can use the phrase brutally murdered, is that they had already surrendered.
Yeah,
is
they
that
were
correct?
POWs.
Right.
And the white ones, there were some white ones amongst them. They were not killed, but 200 black ones were killed. And in fact, there's lots of references in here because after Fort Pillow, the black soldiers used as their rallying cry in battle, "Remember Fort Pillow." And so and it was done over and over again. I mean, they killed. The black soldiers knew if they got caught, they were going to get killed.
Reminds me of Lieutenant Calley.
A little bit, yeah.
Right? Is there a parallel?
Well, the difference is that Calley went nuts to do that. This was his modus operandi. I mean, every time he encountered black soldiers, they were brutally treated.
Lieutenant Calley was convicted of a massacre at My Lai during Vietnam.
Right, but it was a one-time thing. This was his. This is the way he operated. Yeah.
Wow. So he's a leader of the KKK, a slave trader, and involved in this massacre. All of that is indisputable facts about Nathan Bedford Forrest. And then roll around 1959, and we have the Board of Education, we have the Civil Rights Movement, and Jacksonville, this bold new city of the South, decides to name a high school in honor of this man.
Right, pushed by a group called the Daughters of the Confederacy, which is a group I don't know much about. When you look at hate groups, I gave you
hate groups. Yeah,
hate groups.
There's a list. If you want to learn about hate groups, you can go to the, at least according to the Southern Poverty Law Center, you can go to their webpage and read about who they characterize as hate groups.
Right.
And many people will know the Southern Poverty Law Center, led by Morris Dees, and Morris Dees has given an awful lot of credit for disarming the effectiveness of the Ku Klux Klan through the courts by bankrupting them,
literally turning the property where they burn crosses on into schools and parks and other things. Yeah. But anyway, the Daughters of the Confederacy apparently is not a popular organization anymore. But in the 50s, it was a very popular organization, and they're the ones that pushed for the name of the school. So
now, and what do you think their intention was? Were they actually honoring Nathan Bedford Forrest because they liked who he was as a result of being with the KKK, as a result of being this,
One can only imagine.
Were they thumbing their nose at this whole notion of civil rights and equal protection under the law and allowing?
I'm sure that that's the case. I actually tried to look at newspaper coverage of the Florida Times-Union from the time. And it shouldn't surprise us that there's very little, if any, and there's nothing on why. There's something on the fact that they named this new school at the heart of segregation. Again, this is a white school. Today, Nathan Bedford Forrest High School is 51% African American.
Have you made an appearance there? Have you tried to explain to people there, the students there? Do they understand the issue?
Yeah, I guess I should go back and answer your original question, because when I found out about this, in the fall I teach at a local college, and I had my students do projects, and some of them could do papers if they want, and others do service learning, like work for Habitat for Humanity, stuff like that. And 3 of my students said, "I don't know what to do," and I said, "I got an idea. Are you aware of this school?" And 3 of them are African American. 4 students actually decided to do this. And one of them was from the island somewhere, and she couldn't believe that we had a school named after this guy. And I said, "Okay, tell you what, you guys research who he was, why this decision was made, and pick somebody who you think is worthy of really being honored in our community. And when you're all done, we'll present that to the school board." Okay? So my students who are longtime Jacksonville residents said, "Oh, they've heard this before, and they'll never make any changes." And I said, "Well, what do we got to lose?"
You know, that's not, we're going to take a short break, but that's something I want to get back and talk to you. What are the obstacles that have been put in front of you? What are some of the criticisms that you've undoubtedly encountered? A lot of times when I meet people, they are their own biggest obstacle. And they say, "Well, we can't do it because it'll never be done. It's never been done before. Why should I be the guy trying to do this?" It takes somebody like yourself to be the point person to see it to its rightful conclusion. You're watching a program called Civil Discourse. My name is Ken Hurley. This program is sponsored by the American Civil Liberties Union of Greater Jacksonville, Florida. Take a look at these messages. We'll be right back.
Larry Parker, National Honor Society student. Patricia Stevenson, stockbroker. Hector DeSario, systems analyst. Driving while black or brown isn't a crime. If it's happened to you, call us at 1-8776-PROFILE and arrest the racism.
This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine.
In these turbulent times, let us not erode the liberties our country was built on.
Let it shine.
Okay, how many of you are members of the KKK? If you are, you might like Nathan Bedford Forrest. I'm not sure. But we're talking about changing the name of a high school in Jacksonville from Nathan Bedford Forrest to something else that's a little bit more appropriate for the students of Jacksonville. And we're talking with Professor Stephen Lance Stoll. And you're a professor of sociology, I understand.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
What is sociology, just real briefly? Because it seems to be so apropos for what you're trying to accomplish in the study of human interaction regarding this particular issue.
Well, that's what I would basically say the definition of sociology is: the study of human society. Psychologists are interested in what's going on in your head. Sociologists are interested in what's going on between us. Civil discourse, for example, would be a very interesting subject for sociologists, and why we have so little of that in modern America.
Yeah, whoever shouts the loudest seems to win the day too often.
And whoever calls people the most names. And
right.
You know.
Well, we're talking about somebody's name, and we're talking about trying to change that name for reasons that we've articulated. Let's recap them. Nathan Bedford Forrest was the first imperial wizard of the Ku Klux Klan. The Ku Klux Klan is an organization, for those who don't know, look it up. It was an organization dedicated to removing black people from the public square and others too, other minorities and certain religions from the public square. Nathan Bedford Forrest was also a slave trader, made a lot of money in trading slaves, and was also a very skilled general in the Confederate Army, and was known for the Fort Pillow massacre, where people had surrendered, and after their surrender he had killed them, massacred them, and some accounts have him burying people alive. And your book there is
River
Runs Red, published by
Viking.
Viking, a very reputable publishing house, Viking Press, an excellent capitulation of the history and life of Nathan Bedford Forrest.
Both sides. Many of his sources are Confederate sources, you know, because a lot of the people who are saying that he wasn't such a bad guy are using different sources to say that. So.
And then jump to 1959, and we named the high school Nathan Bedford Forrest. Now, Jacksonville, there's no dispute here either that Jacksonville then was an extremely segregated city. White fountains, colored fountains, white schools, black schools, hospitals. You couldn't, if you're black, you couldn't get treated in a hospital unless it was Brewster Hospital. And in the height of the civil rights movement, almost to thumb the nose of the city leaders of Jacksonville at the civil rights movement, they named this school.
Right.
And you're on a quest to championing the cause to change that. What are some of the obstacles that you've encountered? Has everybody said, oh, of course, Stephen, we think this is a great idea, let's change it?
Well, it's funny that you say it that way, because my naivety, I suppose, is I thought on December 8th, when I brought this attention to the school board, that they'd say exactly that. Yeah, we're educated people.
What were we thinking?
Yeah, we're going to
sorry.
change it, and that hasn't happened. And the biggest argument that I've gotten is this idea of tradition and history, and you know,
tradition.
Yeah, tradition.
You know, when somebody offers that in response to this, I have a feeling they're not thinking very clearly.
Well, they say, you know, he's part of our tradition. And remember, first of all, that Nathan Bedford
What tradition
Forrest,
are they speaking of?
well, he never set foot
Are
on
we
soil
going back to
down
the
here.
tradition where we could own black people? Is that the tradition we want to remember?
Apparently so.
Okay, and is that the tradition we want to honor?
Well, not me, but apparently so. And,
Well,
and-
I'd ask those people who
Well,
offer
and they-
that, what specifically
well,
are
they
they
don't
talking
give you
about?
those specifics.
That's why I'm not sure
But they
they're
bring
thinking
up,
clearly.
the second thing they bring up is, well, are you going to change Lee High School and Jeb Stuart High School? And while personally, I think we should change, I don't understand why we honor people that wanted to destroy the Union, but those people are very different from Nathan Bedford Forrest. Remember that 14 of the first 18 presidents of the United States owned slaves. So that can't be the criteria. The criteria should be the character of the individual. And in fact, the school board policy, because I've read it many times now that we're trying to change it, is that the person should be of high moral character. Okay? And clearly this guy was not of high moral, there's three qualifications: high moral character, have something to do with education, and be from the community. He doesn't meet any of those criteria.
He was never in Florida, from what I read.
Never in Florida,
Right.
And never an educator,
Right.
and certainly not of high moral character. So, so there was no justification in the first place, and certainly in the 21st century, when the school board could say tomorrow, boom, we're going to change the name, they're not doing that. So what we're doing is we're following their own policy. And in the tradition of W.E.B. Du Bois,
Well, say, who's that? Tell us who that is.
W.E.B. Du Bois was an African-American sociologist, perhaps the first PhD sociologist teaching in a university. And he was very much about taking action, not just pointing problems out, but doing something to rectify those problems. And so that's why this semester my students are doing a survey of the community, a purely scientific survey. It's not biased. We're not advocating.
What is your survey seeking to achieve? What
we're
information are you soliciting?
We're following the policies of the school board. The school board says to change the name of a school, you have to find out what the community wants to do. So the first thing we're asking is, are you familiar with this controversy?
How do they define community?
Well, they do define it. They define it first, the school community. So the principal of the school is using this same survey to survey her students and faculty and people that live in the community. They also want us to talk with civic leaders. So my students are surveying people at the courthouse, people at the you know, people who run the government, different civic organizations, and then the general public. So we are doing that at 21 libraries throughout Jacksonville. People can pick up the survey and they can fax it to me, and we're going to do the spreadsheets and calibration.
Ask some of the questions on that survey. What are you soliciting?
Well, part of the reason I'm here and done some newspaper and other things is because the school board will not let me, in the survey, tell people who Nathan Bedford Forrest was. So the first question is, I am familiar with the controversy surrounding the name of Nathan Bedford Forrest High School. So if somebody...
That's not a question.
Well, that's the question. So if somebody...
That's a statement.
Right, but if somebody says no to that, then they have no reason to answer anything else. And a lot of people who don't know who Nathan Bedford Forrest was might just say, well, you know, ignorance is bliss. The second question is, should the name be changed? So if you don't know what the controversy is, you're not going to say you should change it, obviously. If somebody says that, then there are 5 names suggested by my students and by the community who showed up at a Forrest School Advisory Board meeting. Charles Bennett, who was a local politician.
Congressman for a long time.
Firestone High, which Firestone is the street.
That's the street that they live.
That's right.
That school is on.
Some people suggested just getting rid of one of the R's, so it's Forest.
Was
like
that an
trees.
administrator?
It's an interesting solution, you know, because then the students could just take an R off of their jackets.
Oh, no. It sounds pretty lame. Go ahead.
Mary Singleton, who was, I believe, the first woman on the community, on this city council.
Okay,
Yeah.
Mary Singleton.
Who was an African American, as I understand it. Scott Spiker. Scott Spiker is the flyer who was lost in the Gulf War.
The first Gulf War, right?
Who was an alumnus. He graduated from Forrest High School.
Spiker High?
Yes. And finally, the name that we suggested, Eartha M.M. White High School. Eartha White was a local educator, philanthropist, civil rights leader.
And related to Clara White?
Yes, she was the daughter of Clara White.
Right.
So, and then we offer, people can put other names in. I was telling you before the show that we had suggested James Brown High School and other names.
Anybody suggest Get?
No.
Get High?
Get High.
School?
Yeah, no,
okay.
they hadn't. But,
well, that's, and then is that it? Or
well, the only thing we really need, because we're using this to calibrate everything, is the zip code. So they can tell us whether they're male, female, they can give their name if they want, but what we really need is the zip code, because when we give it back to the school board, we're going to have it calibrated according to zip code.
Okay, and if somebody wanted to return, how do they get this survey? You said they can go to any library.
Yeah, it's at the library.
How do they get it from you directly?
They can contact Florida Community College downtown campus liberal arts office.
Okay.
And get it from me through there.
All right. And if anybody wants to contact me, they can contact me. You see my contact information at the end of this program, and I'll get you a copy of this survey. And then you can fax it to Stephen. What's your fax number?
It's 904-632-3095.
Okay, and you can get that more information from me too at the end of the program if you didn't get all of that we're talking about. So have you had any responses?
Oh yes, we've had hundreds and thousands, hopefully.
Oh, that's terrific. And then when you get all of these names, you're going to compile them and see how many are similar, how many are suggested the same name. And then what happens?
The name is the secondary. You know, there's two issues here. One is, should we change it from Forrest? Two is, do you have any ideas? If the school board is told that it should be changed, they have the right to pick any name they want. And you know, it's interesting from my personal perspective is, I'd say 70% of my goal was to get rid of Forrest's
we could
name.
have a Tommy Hazouri High School? Is that what we're saying here? Okay, it's possible though, right?
Oh geez, yeah,
Anything's
it's just possible.
Okay. All right. Well,
So I would say 30% of the goal, in my own personal goal, was to get an African American honored. After 50 years of dishonoring the African American community, I think it's appropriate. I'm not sure whether that's going to happen.
Well, the answers that I've heard that are not even compelling from my view against what you're trying to do is that it's part of our history and that it's tradition.
Right.
Both of those are, I think, ill-conceived and not well thought out or articulated. And if you probe those people who offer those as the answer, I think that they will fall flat. Once people understand who Nathan Bedford Forrest is, to me it seems like it's almost a no-brainer. It's time to make the change. If we're trying to take Jacksonville into this world-class city, if we're trying to show the world that we are not a racist town, if we're trying to show the world that we are a 21st century city, it's time to make the change. And speaking of time, guess what? We are out of time, and I want to thank you very kindly for being here and all that you're trying to do.
Thank you.
And I wish you success, and I hope you'll come back on your next project so we can talk more about what you're trying to do. Thank you. You've been watching a program called Civil Discourse. My name is Ken Hurley. We'll see you next time. You have been watching a public access television program called Civil Discourse, sponsored by the American Civil Liberties Union of Greater Jacksonville, Florida. The ACLU is a private, nonprofit, nonpartisan membership organization. Our mission is to protect and advance the civil liberties and civil rights guaranteed by the United States Constitution, especially the principles contained in the Bill of Rights. We want to hear from you. Send us an email, share your views and opinions. If you're interested in appearing on the program, let us know. Friend or foe, we want you on the show. You may contact the ACLU in the following ways. Our telephone number is 904-396-5242. Our post office box is 5331 Jacksonville, Florida 32247. And our email address is aclujax@yahoo.com. My name is Ken Hurley. Thank you for participating in Civil Discourse.
watching Local Access, Channel 29, exclusive programming for Comcast subscribers.
Welcome to The Turning Point, a program featuring education and literacy on Florida's First Coast. I'm Dr. Gail Florence Kane, and I am so happy today to present an array of guests, all representing the Literacy Council of Jacksonville. And to start our program today, I have Terry Allgaier, who is the Literacy Director of the Jacksonville